Hi everyone. So this week I'm going to be responding to the first prompt of this week's discussion question. So chapter 7 of the reading this week talks about the important role oral language plays in the development of English proficiency in EB students. So Wright begins this chapter by talking about how listening is a skill that we use the most, but we tend not to dedicate a lot of time to it, despite how important it is. And he says that there was this old mentality that reading and listening were seen as passive skills, while writing and speaking were seen as active skills. And he says we now know that that's not true. He says that for people to become proficient in listening and oral language, there's a lot that goes along with it that's very difficult for learners of English. For example, not only when you're listening do you have to pay attention to what is being said, but you also have to look at facial expressions. You have to look at gestures. You have to know the context to actually draw meaning from what you're hearing. And he says this is very difficult for learners of English if they don't have enough opportunity to practice these skills. And one of the things that makes it even more difficult is that native speakers tend to speak differently than what they're reading than students are reading in the books. Like, for example, native speakers tend to speak much faster to each other. We, tend to cut ourselves off or speak in incomplete sentences, and we'll even combine words like taking did you and turning it into did ya. And so if students aren't exposed to this kind of speaking, then it can be very hard for them to develop these kind of skills. And Wright says, one of the ironies of oral language is that we know it is important and it is the most often used form of communication, but we tend to spend the least amount of classroom instruction time helping ELLs develop it. So to discuss the important role that oral language plays, Wright draws from 3 different reports, and he talks about their findings. So the first report is the 2006 Center for Research on Education, Diversity, and Excellence, and it found that beginner students advance their oral language faster than advanced students do, because there's a shift away from practicing oral language in higher levels. And so the higher level students start to lag behind their native peers in this area. And it says that EB students should have a chance to interact with, other learners before interacting with native speakers is particularly beneficial. And this report also challenges the idea that, using English only is the most effective strategy and kind of promotes bilingual strategies instead. The second report by the National Literacy Panel found that oral language plays a significant role in the development of reading comprehension and writing. And so having strong oral skills and listening skills will actually make you a stronger reader and stronger writer, despite previous thoughts in this area. And this report also argues that students must maintain consistent ESL instruction so they don't lag behind their peers in higher levels. And it also promotes the idea that students should also get a good knowledge of reading and writing in their home language because they can transfer these skills when they're learning English. And the last report by the National Academies found that their findings were pretty consistent with the other ones, but it also highlighted the importance of dedicating instruction time to oral English proficiency and giving opportunities to interact with other peers who are proficient in English. So Wright spends the rest of the chapter giving some examples about how to incorporate activities and methods that will strengthen the oral proficiency of students. Anything from making sure the teacher isn't monopolizing a lot of the speaking time in class, making sure each student has a chance to participate and giving an adequate silent period and waiting time for them to come up with a response, correcting students' mistakes in productive ways and not overly correcting them. Using strategies such as revoicing, repeating, and reasoning allows students to correct and clarify what they're saying, and also allows them to explore their English knowledge more and not just give prompted answers. Wright also talked a lot about the different ways that students can have opportunities to speak and in a lot more comfortable ways as well. So many of these activities involved breaking the students into groups where they had to interact with each member of the group and contribute their own ideas. Doing things such as barrier games or games like What Am I provide fun opportunities for students to use their vocabulary in different scenarios. Wright talked about the importance for students to listen to native speakers through listening to audio recordings of books being read aloud that maybe they can take home, or playing games that involve listening to directions and completing tasks. He also talked a lot about how songs and dances provide a good opportunity for students to learn new vocabulary and practice pronunciation. The melody and the gestures of songs go a long way for developing long-term understanding. Wright really promoted the idea of getting away from ineffective strategies like vocabulary drilling or prompted class discussions where students may feel shy and also barely get any chances to speak. All right, thank you so much, guys.